Part 2. What the happened? Historical perspectives in getting screwed. Sometimes you have to dig in the dirt to really clean things up. Feminism Gone Wrong 101. Splitting tabs, burning bras, and other bad ideas. Time for a little history lesson, ladies. America, 1914. The war left women lonely. Or did it? Yes, they were without their husbands, but if we consider the quality of some of those marriages and spouses, then maybe for some, that was a good thing for both parties. With the breadwinners out of the house, for better or for worse, women were left to fend for themselves financially. What did they do? They said, "Bring it on," and went to work. Many of them loved it. They loved the freedom that financial independence afforded them. Some of their marriages felt like prisons. Still others just like the sense of personal pride, success, and accomplishment that went along with being self-sufficient. That was all great stuff. But then, somewhere along the way, things changed. Decades later, these courageous women had descendants in the mix. Their grand and great-granddaughters, armed with a little self-made dough in their cute little handbags, started feeling themselves, ourselves, because they are us. We started imitating men, believing that being like the guys made us more powerful, stronger women. Rather than acknowledging the fantastic strength of our femininity in its own right, we tried to replicate masculine energy, and that never works out well. How did that happen? Usher in the 90s. I love 90s pop and fashion just as much as the next person. Baggy pants and colorful shirts were just coming onto the scene when the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air had everyone running to the malls to cop his cool duds. Clothes were flashy, hair was high, and music seemed louder than ever before. But while many little girls were grooving with their pink little boom boxes, listening to NSYNC, New Edition, and Savage Garden sing their gentlemanly way into millions of tween-age hearts, other, less gentlemanly recording artists expressed creative differences as they related their thoughts about women and the appropriate dynamic of male-female relationships. While break dancers were drawing large crowds at Venice Beach, these less than lady-loving lyricists and their chewed number 2 pencils on spiral notebooks were busy breaking us down. Songs like "Bitch Better Have My Money" helped set off a chain reaction of disrespect and misogyny, and no, he wasn't saying have as in help yourself to my money, my dear, my moolah is your moolah, not by far. He was, rather, demanding that the woman pay him for sex. Similar messages began pumping through the walls of our favorite night spots, and this was only the tip of the iceberg. Surely we can't forget about "Shake That Ass, Bitch, and Let Me See What You Got," "Big Pimpin' Ain't No Fun If the Homies Can't Have None," and "There's Some Hoes in This House," and "Me So Horny." You get the picture. Initially, these outrageous songs were isolated to a small audience, a narrow demographic, but soon their sordid sound waves permeated the air of even some of the poshest night spots, invading the orifices of partygoers from big cities to rural towns and communities. Stealthily, these offensive, barbaric lyrics came bundled with beats that were hypnotizing and sadly inspiring. Worse than the worst subliminal message, these female-bashing beats took over our bodies and made us want to get out there and dance. Women, that is. Men just stood back and watched us bring the songs to life. So we found ourselves huddled on the dance floor, dancing with ourselves, holding our self-purchased drinks, shaking our pretty little behinds compliantly, all the while giggling and making googly eyes at the menfolk standing on the outskirts, nodding their heads in superior approval, assuming that we must be down with the musical message washing our brains. Wow! Look at that bitch over there, shaking her ass and let me see what she's got. Shake it, bitch, shake it. That's what they had to be thinking, because there we were, obeying Splack Pack and Kid Money's orders, shaking our asses and letting them see what we've got. But degrading lyrics in the 90s weren't the end of it, for there was more misogyny on the horizon. As the 90s prepared to wrap up, unbeknownst to us, there was more mayhem in the works, and it wouldn't be long into the next millennium before we'd see the emergence of low-quality literature getting into the act. We'd soon see male-targeted books like How to Be a Player filthy up the shelves of some of our favorite bookstores, muscling their way into the self-help sections, taking up precious reading real estate on cherry oak planks. So, be it via the radio or our favorite reading rooms, the 90s and immediately following found us out with our girlfriends and in with ourselves, awaiting instructions on how to proceed into the next millennium. Goodbye, 20th century. Then came Y2K. When the 90s showed itself to the door, looked over its shoulder and told us it's been fun, we waved back ambiguously, wondering whether we should thank it or punch it in the face. You see, we were still dissatisfied with our love lives. We weren't any better off than we were before all the booty shaking and drink buying, and now, to top it off, we didn't feel accomplished enough, or pretty enough, or smart enough. We felt like there was still so much more work to be done before we could even dare consider ourselves worthy of love. Not just any love, the kind of love movies told us existed in the worlds of other women, women who were not us, women we wanted to be. We decided we needed to up our game. We needed to figure out ways to make ourselves more romantically marketable in order to secure a guy like whatever those perfect women's names are that they tell us exist. Determined to make ourselves a certified catch, even if it killed us, we began burning ourselves out. We found ourselves getting up at the crack of dawn, rushing off to work with our college degrees on display, designer suits on our backs, and power pumps on our feet, clutching purses that we'd spent so much money on we couldn't afford to put much money inside. We worked until the sun was about to set, then, worn out, hopped back in our cars, checking for messages from you-know-who did not call. We thought he liked us. How couldn't he? We'd put our best pedicured foot forward with him, hoping he was the one. We'd cooked for him, told him all of our business in order to show just how attractively layered we are. We slept with him, put it on him in the best worst way in the bedroom. So why didn't he call? After pondering it for a few weeks, we soon realized that he was the one who didn't want us, the one who wouldn't call us back, the one who already had his way with us and was now moving on to the next long-legged adventure, the one we wanted to murder. Feeling the rejection, but not really wanting to risk spending a lifetime in a 6x8 cell, followed by an eternity in hell, we replaced our homicidal fantasies with modified hope and began exploring Plan Bs. All the while, though, we were hurting, struggling, self-doubting. The pain, as intense as it was, tried to get our attention, and eventually it did. It made us think. That was a good thing. The pain told us that something was off, and that we needed to take some time to rethink our romantic strategies. Our choices when it came to dating Mr. F.U. for not calling, and the likes of him and other men, as it had now been revealed to us that there was a high risk of heartbreak associated with exercising poor judgment and dating a dirtbag. Dating a dirtbag is dangerous. It can seriously injure your self-esteem. Again, this pain-driven pondering was good. Reflection is a wonderful thing. But instead of responding to this pain, this stimulus, in a way that would have easily corrected things, we started overthinking things, like when you overthought that relatively easy multiple-choice question back in AP Human Geography, the one whose answer you knew, but it seemed too easy, too simplistic to actually be correct. Putting our magnificent brain power to poor use, we overanalyzed the obvious. Nonetheless, being the natural problem solvers that we are, we sashayed our way back over to our respective drawing boards and began drafting plans for a comeback, a stronger, pain-proof comeback. Become the predator, not the prey, was what we came up with. We psyched ourselves out to believe that we could operate as men do and thus be happier, at least less sad. Be like the boys, we encouraged each other. If we can't beat them, be them. We thought for sure we'd cracked the code of conduct that would bring us ultimate dating success. Little Kim told us we could be boss bitches who could run the whole sexual show and have him eating out of the palms of our hands while keeping our emotions and egos in check. Even Destiny's Child had us thinking we could coldly, when it's over, please get up and leave him, as we rolled over on our sides for some extra shut-eye and bask in a more masculine version of Afterglow, telling him to lock the door behind him on his way out. While that burlesque strategy may work for the world-famous, multi-talented, filthy rich and beautiful combo, the WMFB, as it applies to the rest of us, being so icy will only leave us lonely. In plainer English, it ain't gonna work for us. Sorry, it's just not, because his ass will get up and leave, which would be fine if that's what we really wanted. But since it isn't, well, as any responsible sword swallower would say, don't try that at home. For those of us that actually want our man of the moment to stay and hang around for a while, that kiss and dismiss strategy would work against everything we hope for in a potential relationship. We want him to stay. We want him to stay and love us. We want him to be our mate. Dismissing him is the furthest thing from our minds after we sexually connect with a guy we like. And trying to play cold-hearted, overriding our natural instincts, our marvelous Mother Nature-provided programming, to behave as if we can operate on an emotionally absent level, as some of these male players do, is just us now playing ourselves. Nonetheless, some of us did try this strategy and failed miserably. The whole trying to act as if we lacked emotion subsequently made us even bigger victims of bad romances and left us even sadder than we were before. Here's why. We're not men. That's a biologically simple fact. Just like we're not ducks, we're not men. We'd look quite silly waddling around the city, quacking like crazy because we thought ducks had it better, now wouldn't we? Likewise, we look equally as absurd trying to pull off the same stunts as some of these so-called men and believe we'll actually experience increased satisfaction and relationship success. Beaks off, beauties. We're women. Let's work that. Songs that uplift women and love. Tired of self-esteem lowering songs in your diamond-studded satellites? Try these alternatives. Sure to give you an instant boost and remind you of just how precious of a being you really are and what real men think of you and our kind. Some of us may call these corny. No worries, that's just the brainwashing talking. You'll work through it. Eventually, you'll come to find that the word you're looking for is decent or loving or beautiful, maybe even what used to be the norm before all the brainwashing and manipulating. And don't just stop at the titles. Listen to the lyrics and enjoy. A Decent Dozen. Number 1, You Are So Beautiful, Billy Preston. Number 2, I Love You Just the Way You Are, Billy Joel. Number 3, I'll Name the Dogs, Blake Shelton. Number 4, All My Life, Casey and JoJo. Number 5, I'll Never Break Your Heart, Backstreet Boys. Number 6, This I Promise You, NSYNC. Number 7, Endless Love, Lionel Richie. Number 8, I'll Make Love to You, Boys to Men. Number 9, I Don't Want to Miss a Thing, Aerosmith. Number 10, When a Man Loves a Woman, Percy Sledge. Number 11, She's Got Away, Billy Joel. And number 12, I Just Called to Say I Love You, Stevie Wonder. So what about that bra-burning business? The women's liberation movement. On the historical heels of the women's right to vote victory, the women's liberation movement was like round 2 of Get Your Foot Off My Neck, and was comprised of several feminist groups who continued to fight against all forms of oppression and male supremacy. They fought for equality with respect to politics, personal choices, and economics. Without it, you and I would be living a substantially less quality of life today. Here were some of its victories for us women. The right to work. The right to not be fired for being pregnant. The right to pursue a higher education. The right to play college sports. The right to study women's studies. Reproductive rights. Way to go, ladies. Great job. And thank you. Imagine living a life where the above was not the norm. Pretty repulsive, right? Yep. Oppression always is. Dear Miss Independent, the women's liberation movement set out to liberate you from oppression and inequality, not to liberate you from your good God-given sense. Yet, while the women's liberation movement set out to undo some of the lousy laws that the breast and uterus-less population had established, it did not, however, fight for the following reasons: to make you believe that you should be the one to ask a guy out on a date, to give you the impression that you should pay for said date, to encourage you to call a guy or text him like crazy, to compel you to compare yourself to other women, or to compete for the affections of a man, to have you criticize yourself every time you look in the mirror. No, my lovelies, those wonderful warriors of women's rights did not fight for your right to be a fool or to let a man walk all over you, nor did they fight for you to begin becoming men or behaving like them. Otherwise, they would have called it the women's termination movement. Stop playing the Adam's apple. Stop trying to emulate men. Stop trying to prove your strength, and just be strong. A woman is strong not because she can act like a man. She is strong because she is a woman. A man after my own heart, William Golding, said it best. I think women are foolish to pretend they're equal to men. They are far superior and always have been. Whatever you give a woman, she will make it greater. If you give her sperm, she'll give you a baby. If you give her a house, she will give you a home. If you give her groceries, she will give you a meal. If you give her a smile, she will give you her heart. She multiplies and enlarges what is given to her. So if you give her any crap, be ready to receive a ton of shit. William Golding, British novelist, playwright, and poet, 1911 to 1993. The bras? The bras already? What about the bras? Headlines of barbecued bras strategically stole the show, subtracting from the seriousness of the women's liberation movement. News reports of women taking off their boob holders in support of the movement was disproportionately prevalent, intentionally eclipsing and minimalizing the real goals of a very powerful momentum-gaining fight. Rather than real coverage, some media outlets broadcasted their own versions of the movement, thus manufacturing it in the minds of the masses. Their versions painted these very courageous women marching around taking off some piece of their lingerie in the name of liberation and equality and burning it on the streets in some freedom-demanding display. This, sadly for some, became what first comes to mind when thinking about the social political movement. While there was a very small group of women protesters who, on one particular day outside the Miss America contest, threw several items into a trash can, including some bras, the term bra burning associated with the women's liberation movement was a gross misrepresentation of what was really going on. This was clearly an attempt to discredit and ridicule, and it was later revealed that no burning of anything ever took place that day, bras included. This fake news, as we call it today, was just another way to make women look silly and unworthy of being taken seriously. So before you go unhooking your racerback, consider that you and I have been brainwashed into believing that the strong, courageous, socially conscious woman before us rallied primarily for the ridiculous right to go braless. It's just not true. Don't believe the hype. The moral of the story? Don't be deceived. Just as the old school media tried to make the world believe that bra burning and going braless was the central focus of the women's liberation movement, modern manipulative men will have you believing that paying your own way on dates and carrying his load is the new norm. It isn't. So go on, put your bra back on, and adopt reasonable standards when it comes to dating. It's still reasonable to expect to be doted on by a man who's interested in getting romantically close to you. Being a woman with standards is always in fashion. In part 4 of this book, we'll discuss more about what it means to put your bra back on, as well as fantastic ways to do so. His story. We saw in the previous section our mindsets as they pertain to dating and relating to men have sustained some serious trauma. It's fair to say that history hasn't necessarily been women's best friend. Men, too, however, have a history of their own worth telling. There is certainly a historical perspective to be considered when it comes to our testosterone-rich counterparts. Men, it seems, have a history of busying themselves as well as being obsessed with speed, capture, and collecting. When a man is a boy, he has hobbies to which he devotes his time, energy, and resources. He'd spend his allowance on his interest and his weekends in the garage working on his favorite pastimes. Trains, coin collecting, amateur etymology. He finds delight in these things as he ages. Notice I didn't say matures. That is not necessarily a given, as is aging. His focus shifts. He develops a new hobby, a new focus. You. Us. Women. Women become a man's favorite new hobby. His fascination revolves no longer around objects with wheels and wings, rather bodies with boobs and softer things. His obsession with speed now relates to how fast he can get into your underwear. No longer do the males of our species, upon growing up, try to capture bugs and collect old currency. When their bones elongate and facial hair sprouts, so too do their appetites for capturing your sweetest affections. They're now more interested in having their way with you than bragging about their conquest over brewskis with the boys. Yes, women become men's favorite hobby, the hobby of all hobbies. Yes, it's all about you. Go on, blush. But this isn't just an ego-feeding exercise. No false sense of self-importance being dished out here. Just real deal, true blue facts. A single man spends the majority of his time, whether he recognizes it or not, making decisions that better position him to appear more desirable to a woman. From his haircut to his car, from his job to his gym, he wants to increase his chances of meeting a fantastic woman. That's normal, by the way, and we like that, don't we? Let's all shake our heads in unison. So, while we're reminding ourselves of that fact, let's remember this as well. It only works to our benefit if we know it to be true, and if we play our role accordingly, because the one who is pursued has the power. Now, let's clear up any negative connotation associated with the word power, because I don't want this to get in the way of how you receive this message and thus deny what is rightfully yours. We must do this right away, lest we proceed with an unwarranted aversion to this idea and an unwillingness to assume this gift that is inherently feminine. Power is not a bad thing. It's not some sadistic tool we wield in order to degrade or disrespect another person. So guys, if you're nosy enough to be thumbing through this right now, don't get your boxer briefs in a bunch. And while we're at it, put this back on your woman's shelf. Power, as defined by Webster's, is the following. 1. Possession of control, authority, or influence over others. 2. The ability to act or do something. 3. Physical might, mental strength. All of those definitions work for me. How about you, ladies? You have the power. Stop forfeiting it. You are the prize. Nature made it that way. Males work toward winning over females. They pursue, they prance around, they chase, they impress, they provide. Don't believe me? Just take a glance around the animal kingdom. Take birds, for example. Let's look at some of the things male birds do for the love and attention of a female. They sing their hearts out. Sexual selection can be as fickle as hitting the right note at the right time, and while singing when it comes to birds is not all about attraction, it's hard to deny that, as a female, being sung to is a pretty darn good aphrodisiac, and, in this case, a fairly effective way for a male bird to get a peek under those feathers. They get their dance on. Male birds really know how to cut a rug, but even if they aren't the Fred Astaire of their flock, that doesn't stop them from trying to dance their way into the love nest of the females of their species. Crested pigeons, albatross, and bower birds, to name a few, all bust a move in the name of lure. Birds of paradise in particular take their choreography quite seriously. They don't just rely on those fancy dance genes that they inherit by the dozen from Papa Paradise, but actually spend significant time practicing to refine their moves in order to really make them their own. How could any female resist? They gift. Penguins, like some other birds, are so serious about winning the object of their affection that they show the female of their choosing that they are able to provide for them in a major way. Male pings present to their chosen ones beautiful stones and pebbles as a way of saying, "Baby, I can get this ice off your ass. Let's build a home together. Then he uses these geological gems to build her a nest in which the two of them share. Cool move. Not to be outdone, though, spiders have taken a page from the penguin's Lovers with Blubber handbook and did some slight editing. Instead of pebbles and stones, spiders of the species Paratrilecha ornate, for example, will present to their courted ones silk-wrapped yummies in order to get a little eight-legged lovin'. While she's busy unwrapping her din-din, he's going in. But, as with all spiders, you really have to watch your back. Some of their prey presents, up to 70%, turn out to be total duds. His leftovers, random scraps, and offerings of very low nutritional value. It's like giving her a fake diamond. Where is the bug spray when you need it? They show what they're working with. No male of our species would ever wish to be referred to as being hung like a bird, but in the case of the ribbon-tailed Astrophia, this little birdie would be considered the most well-endowed of all birds relative to its body size. Its 3-foot-long pair of tail feathers proves effective at turning plenty of feathered heads, while toting around such biological baggage can be a literal pain in the rear for him, as it makes him more visible to predators and often gets tangled up in tree branches. The payoff is in the preferential attention he receives from the ladybirds. Putting sex before safety, he wouldn't be the first male of any species to risk his life for a piece of punani. They make the ultimate sacrifice. This one's not exactly bird-specific, but it's certainly worth mentioning. While some birds are known to mate for life, such as the bald eagle, black vulture, and California condor, a certain insect takes their till-death-do-us-part promises to a more drastic and premature level, upstaging all other males of the animal kingdom. Praying mantis males allow themselves to be eaten mid-mating. Yes, eaten. But even though he won't be around to change any mini mantis diapers, Daddy still brings home the bacon, so to speak, as these males make for an excellent source of nutrients for the eggs the female will lay as a result of their copulation and her subsequent cannibalization of him. So, while having his head bit off while getting his swerve on doesn't exactly seem very romantic, this papa-to-be takes posthumous pride in being able to still provide for his young'uns in the afterlife, whether it cost a literal arm and a leg. Kids gotta eat. Talk about crumb snatchers. Bird and bug envy? Yeah, me too. But don't fret. It's not too late to learn from our fellow females, feathered or otherwise. We're not asking for the males of our species to go all praying mantis on us, but maybe a little penguin would do the trick. Are you in? So now that you've got a little background and a better understanding of the mess that's become of the human dating ritual, let's get started on fixing it. Ready? I'm with you, ladies. We're in this together. Come along with me as I inspire you to take those pants off and put your bra back on in order to resurrect some real love in our lives.